Bienvenido a Fiscalía Federal. Vamos a dar comienzo a la conferencia de prensa. Y ahora con ustedes, nuestro fiscal general, Todd Blanche.
All right, buenos dias. It's great for me to be here visiting Puerto Rico for the very first time. And I'm honored and proud to be here as the Attorney General of the United States. I want to thank our acting U.S. Attorney, Hector Ramirez, who's standing to my right, and his office for hosting me today on what I think is a exciting, phenomenal day for the District of Puerto Rico and a great example of the success that this administration is having with our Homeland Security Task Force and all the work that they do using an all-government approach to combating violent crime and the illegal flow of narcotics. We're here today to announce a takedown that took place yesterday following a San Juan Homeland Security Task Force investigation. The FBI and the Puerto Rico Police Department successfully led this takedown and arrest of 70 members of a violent drug trafficking organization that had been active for years throughout the west side of Puerto Rico. Last week, an indictment was filed and returned by a grand jury charging 81 defendants for illicit activity starting in 2021. These defendants are alleged drug traffickers of Los Bajadeo, also known as LBD. They were charged with the illegal possession and distribution of mass quantities of cocaine, crack cocaine, fentanyl, heroin, and marijuana. 21 of the 81 defendants were also charged with illegal firearms possession and furtherance of the drug trafficking crimes I just described. During this investigation, law enforcement seized 21 firearms, and it's estimated that during the span of this conspiracy since 2021, this organization was responsible for the distribution of at least 340 kilograms of fentanyl or fentanyl-laced narcotics and at least 2,200 kilograms of cocaine, among other things. This generated an estimated $49 million in proceeds for this drug trafficking organization. The DTO, and that's what they are, a domestic terrorist organization, did not rely solely on drug trafficking to generate profits. The defendants used violence as a means of conducting business, including threats and intimidation to maintain control and power over the drug trafficking operations to secure the proceeds for the participants and members. Now, to protect this enterprise, they carried out extreme acts of violence, including murders, drive-by shootings, kidnappings, and physical assaults. They possessed firearms, including machine guns, to protect and advance the organization and recklessly discharge these firearms in public places in broad daylight and in the presence of innocent bystanders. This conduct necessarily reflects an indifference to human life. For some of these defendants, this prosecution does not represent a first encounter with the criminal justice system. Their repeated disregard for the law confirms that they pose a continuing and escalating threat to public safety. I want to thank and commend our U.S. Attorney, Hector Ramirez, the entire U.S. Attorney's Office, the District of Puerto Rico, the FBI, the Puerto Rico Police Department, HSI, DEA, and ATF for working together to dismantle this violent gang that can no longer pose a threat to our community. Thank you to all the other law enforcement partners that supported yesterday's arrests, of which there were many. These are the type of partnerships that save lives. So let this be a warning to those that are terrorizing our communities. Our Homeland Security task forces around the country are unified, and they're unified to end the presence of criminal cartels, foreign gangs, and transnational criminal organizations around the United States. our efforts to root out transnational crime gangs and cartels doesn't just stop in the United States and extends to other places in South America. The Trump administration is committed to deploying truly innovative and never before used approaches and partnerships to eliminate drugs, cartels, and violent crime. In that vein, I am proud to announce that yesterday morning, our DEA Special Forces, along with Ecuadorian law enforcement and the Department of War, executed a historic operation in Ecuador targeting the leadership of the foreign terrorist organization Los Choneros and Los Lobos. These two organizations send drugs across the continent and maintain trips throughout Ecuador to transport drugs. Yesterday's operation resulted in 26 arrests, including 4 leaders of the Los Lobos cartel and 2 Mexican nationals who were members of CJ&G. 1 metric ton of cocaine was seized yesterday, as well as around $1 million in U.S. currency, 35 rifles, 26 vehicles, over 40 cell phones, an airplane, and due to the efforts yesterday morning, 3 clandestine airports and landing strips were destroyed. This operation reflects the strength of our partnership in Ecuador and across the entire Western Hemisphere. Taking the fight to the cartels with unprecedented force and efficiency makes clear that we, along with our international partners, have zero tolerance for criminal activity. It's exactly what President Trump has directed us to do, and we are making history by doing it while making communities safer at home and abroad. In addition to what happened yesterday here in Puerto Rico and what happened yesterday in Ecuador, there's more. Thanks to the efforts by the Homeland Security Task Force, Dominican Republic cocaine kingpin and leader of a Dominican-based international drug operation, Eric Rendil Masqueo Polanco, was extradited yesterday from Colombia to San Juan, Puerto Rico, to face charges in 2 separate indictments here, as well as money laundering charges filed in the District of New Jersey. During this HSTF investigation, law enforcement seized millions of dollars worth of cocaine and narcotics proceeds from the drug trafficking organization that he ran, and numerous other members of the drug trafficking organization have already been arrested, charged, and many of them convicted. This week's operations in Puerto Rico and Ecuador exemplify the success of this innovative strategy across the globe. And we will not let up until the job is done. This Homeland Security Task Force model is an all-of-government approach. It uses state and local law enforcement, police officers, state troopers, HSI, DEA, FBI, ATF, the marshals, state and local prosecutors at the Department of War when necessary. And it's a whole government approach, and when we do this, when we all stand together, we can deliver the promise of safer and healthier communities. I want to end by again thanking the fantastic work of our law enforcement partners, the federal agencies involved in yesterday's successful takedown, the prosecutors that have worked tirelessly on this case, the paralegals and support staff in this office that worked tirelessly on this case, and to our great acting U.S. Attorney, Hector Ramirez, who I'll ask to say a few words now. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Hector Ramirez Jarbo, acting as attorney for the District of Puerto Rico. Attorney General Blanche, thank you for being here today and for your steadfast support for our fight against drug trafficking and violent crime in Puerto Rico. Your leadership strengthens the federal, state, and local collaboration that drives the Homeland Security Task Force under which this case was investigated. This case underscores how important law enforcement partnerships are in our mission to safeguard communities we serve. It is an honor to stand with you today as we discuss the results of this significant prosecution and our shared commitment to public safety. For years, the citizens of my hometown in Mayagüez, Puerto Rico, have lived in fear of violence perpetrated often in broad daylight by the violent drug trafficking gang that we have eradicated in this operation. These 81 violent gang members will now face justice, and so will any other that try to take their place. Today, the families of Mayagüez can peacefully enjoy what their communities have to offer without fear of harm. For the benefit of the people of Puerto Rico, I will now turn to Spanish. Buenos días y bienvenidos. Esta mañana estamos anunciando los arrestos producto de una acusación emitida el 19 de agosto por un gran jurado contra 81 acusados como resultado de una investigación relacionada al tráfico de drogas y crímenes violentos. Esta investigación es parte de la iniciativa Homeland Security Task Force, establecida mediante la orden presidencial Protección del Pueblo Estadounidense contra la Invasión. El FBI es la agencia líder de la investigación junto a la Policía de Puerto Rico, Strike Force de Mayagüez. También colaboraron en esta investigación HSI, DEA, ATF y los inspectores postales. Las otras agencias que participaron en los arrestos fueron la Oficina de Aduanas y Protección Fronteriza de Estados Unidos, CBP por sus siglas en inglés, los alguaciles federales, Border Patrol, la Policía Municipal de Guaynabo y la Guardia Nacional de Puerto Rico. El pliego acusatorio consta de 7 cargos imputando 81 miembros de la ganga de narcotráfico mejor conocida como los bajadeos. Y los bajadeos no es otra cosa que el signo que ellos hacían, que era como una sentencia de muerte. Si usted se encontraba con ellos y era de las gangas rivales, esto significaba que usted era hombre muerto. Se las acusa por posesión y distribución de heroína, fentanilo, crack, cocaína y marihuana. Mantenían sus operaciones de tráfico de drogas en aproximadamente 23 residenciales públicos y comunidades de Mayagüez, virtualmente en todo Mayagüez, Puerto Rico. 21 de los acusados también enfrentan un cargo de posesión de armas de fuego durante la comisión del delito de tráfico de drogas. El objetivo de bajadeo era mantener el control de todas las actividades de narcotráfico en el área oeste, mediante el uso de la fuerza, amenaza, violencia e intimidación. Los miembros de la ganga utilizaban celulares, redes sociales y walkie-talkies para adelantar sus operaciones, alertar sobre la presencia de la policía o de miembros de gangas rivales y para planificar actos de violencia. Además, portaban y exhibían y disparaban armas de fuego, incluidas ametralladoras, para mantener el control de sus operaciones, protegerse y resguardar sus narcóticos y sus ganancias. En ocasiones, los propios miembros de la ganga modificaban las armas de fuego que usaban para convertirlas en armas automáticas y participaban en la distribución y el tráfico de armas con organizaciones de narcotráfico. Los acusados llevaron a cabo secuestros, tiroteos y asesinatos en lugares públicos a plena luz del día y en presencia de personas inocentes. La acusación también incluye una alegación de confiscación por la suma de $49.753.725, generados como ganancia por la organización, así como la confiscación de armas de fuego y municiones utilizados para promover los delitos presentados. De ser declarados culpables de los cargos de tráfico de drogas, los coacusados enfrentan una pena mínima de 10 años de prisión y una máxima de cadena perpetua. De ser hallados culpables de la posesión del delito de armas de fuego durante la comisión del delito de tráfico de drogas, los 21 acusados que enfrentan este cargo enfrentan una pena mínima de 15 años de prisión con una pena máxima de cadena perpetua. Quiero destacar la labor de los agentes que trabajaron en el caso y de los fiscales federales Natalia Quiñones Cruz, María López Aponte y Frank Norris por sus excelentes ejecutorias en esta investigación. Una acusación formal es meramente una alegación y todos los acusados se presumen inocentes hasta que se demuestre su culpabilidad más allá de toda duda razonable. Con esto les dejo al agente a cargo del FBI en San Juan, Carlos Goris.
Buenos días a todos. First of all, I'd like to thank Attorney General Todd Blanche for taking the time to call all the way down to Puerto Rico for this takedown. Our folks worked extremely hard on this case, and to have you recognize the results in this case validates their labor. Ahora me quiero dirigir al pueblo de Puerto Rico. Cuando yo llegué aquí en abril, le dije al pueblo que el FBI iba a tener una postura firme y agresiva en contra del crimen violento. También les dije que trabajaríamos en equipo con nuestros colegas del orden público. Este operativo ha sido liderado por el equipo del FBI en Aguadilla y es evidencia de que nuestro compromiso se está cumpliendo y solo estamos comenzando. Hoy, junto a la Fiscalía Federal y demás colegas que componen el HIDTA, el FBI se enorgulle en anunciar los resultados de un esfuerzo intenso de recobrar el control de las comunidades del oeste de la isla de Puerto Rico. Nuestros agentes de la oficina del FBI en Aguadilla iniciaron y trabajaron arduamente esta investigación llamada Operating Taking Back the West, que es un trabajo a largo plazo de coordinación compleja y que tiene como blanco la organización transnacional violenta Los Bajos Deo. Como le explicó el fiscal federal Héctor Ramírez, esa organización ha operado en 7 residenciales públicos y múltiples comunidades de la región. Su actividad criminal ha impactado familias, vecinos y negocios locales por años. Son responsables de trasiego de narcóticos a gran escala en Puerto Rico, incluyendo del envío de sustancias controladas a los Estados Unidos continentales a través del uso del correo postal de los Estados Unidos. Esas operaciones ilícitas generan grandes cantidades de dinero al año, mientras ponen veneno en las manos de nuestros jóvenes todos los días. Nuestra inteligencia y hallazgos investigativos atan a esa organización a aproximadamente 20 asesinatos, números de tiroteos y actos de violencia que han tenido un profundo impacto en la seguridad pública en el oeste de la isla de Puerto Rico. A través de esa investigación, nuestros agentes han logrado identificar que los suplidores principales de esta organización están basados en México y tienen lazos con otras organizaciones criminales que operan en dicha región. Como se podrán imaginar, una investigación de esta magnitud no es posible sin la colaboración con otras agencias de ley y orden. Por eso quiero agradecer al Strike Force de Mayagüez, de la Policía de Puerto Rico, y también a los colegas del Servicio Postal, el ATF, el HSI y el Departamento del Estado. La unidad de esfuerzo y colaboración ha sido esencial para que nuestros agentes pudieran lograr el resultado. Quiero agradecer además a la Fiscalía Federal, sin el apoyo incondicional que siempre recibimos en su oficina. Gracias a su ayuda, nuestro trabajo se convierte en la justicia. Por último, pero no menos importante, quiero reconocer que nuestra oficina central en Washington, D.C. no escatimó en recursos para este operativo. Tuvimos una gran cantidad de equipos tácticos y técnicos del Grupo de Respuestas a Incidentes Críticos del FBI que trasladaron a Puerto Rico para asegurar que este operativo fuera exitoso, pero sobre todo seguro. Los dejo con este mensaje. Puerto Rico puede ser una isla y no estar geográficamente conectado a los Estados Unidos. Pero para el FBI no hay nada más importante que atacar el crimen violento y defender nuestra nación de organizaciones transnacionales que quieren destruir nuestras comunidades con violencia y veneno. Esto significa que nuestros recursos no están limitados a los que trabajan aquí día a día. Si tenemos que inundar la isla con equipos tácticos y hacer esto mismo 10 veces más, así lo haremos. También quiero dejar algo claro. El crimen no respeta fronteras, pero eso no es una limitación para este FBI. El peso entero del gobierno federal y la fuerza de nuestros lazos de colaboración a nivel internacional se usarán mientras sea necesario hasta acabar con esta amenaza. Así que el trabajo no termina aquí, ni se limita a este 100 por 35. Les dije hace par de meses que nosotros no nos íbamos de vacaciones. Y aquí está la primera entrega de esos resultados. Continuaremos haciendo el trabajo y llevando las investigaciones a donde sea que nos lleven. Muchas gracias y ahora le paso al superintendente de la Policía de Puerto Rico, Joseph González.
Buenos días. First, I want to recognize and welcome Attorney General Todd Blanche to Puerto Rico. Mr. Attorney General, on behalf of the more than 11,000 men and women of the police of Puerto Rico, welcome to our island. Your presence here sends an important message. Federal and Puerto Rico law enforcement stand together. And I want you to know the police of Puerto Rico will continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Department of Justice and all our federal partners. We share the same mission: protect our communities, dismantle violent conditions, and take dangerous offenders off our streets. Today's announcement demonstrates what we can accomplish when we combine our intelligence, our resources, and most importantly, people. You can count on the police of Puerto Rico, sir. Ahora quiero hablarle directamente a nuestra gente en Puerto Rico. El operativo que anunciamos hoy no ocurre de un día para otro. Investigaciones como esta requieren meses de trabajo, vigilancia, inteligencia, órdenes judiciales y agentes que todos los días arriesgan su vida para identificar y sacar de nuestras calles a los más violentos. Y ese trabajo sigue todos los días. Nuestra política es clara. Los más violentos van primero y los resultados hablan por sí solos. En estos primeros 7 meses del año hemos ejecutado más de 1,000 órdenes de allanamiento. Hemos ocupado más de 1,300 armas de fuego ilegales. Hemos sacado de circulación más de 10,000 kilogramos de cocaína y 25 kilos de fentanilo. Y hemos arrestado a cientos de fugitivos, más buscados, gatilleros y ofensores violentos. El mensaje de la Policía de Puerto Rico es sencillo. Si utiliza la violencia para intimidar a nuestras comunidades, si utiliza armas ilegales, si vende drogas, vamos atrás de ti. Y lo vamos a hacer junto a nuestros compañeros federales, con todos los recursos disponibles y con toda la fuerza de la ley. Esa es nuestra responsabilidad y esa es nuestra misión. Gracias.
All right, thank you guys very much. We'll take some questions. If your question is in Spanish, I have some help up here. If you want the question directed to somebody besides me, just let me know, and that person is happy to answer. All right, any questions?
Sí, yo encuentro en el mundo político sobre los asesinatos a los que se vincula esta organización. ¿Hay información específica de qué incidentes se pueden atribuir a este grupo en el área de Mayagüez?
Luis Guardiola from Telemundo, Puerto Rico. Regarding this drug organization, are there any specific incidents regarding the murders that you have mentioned that can be linked to this one specific organization?
So I'll let that question be answered more specifically by the folks closer to it. But what I have been told is, and as alleged in the indictment, you had examples of real violence, sometimes in broad daylight, in communities where there's children, women and children, and senior citizens living, whether it's firearms being discharged. other acts of violence. And so the specifics around that to the extent that we can talk about them, I don't know if you want to, one of you guys want to address that.
So, básicamente, nosotros no podemos dar la información de los nombres de asesinatos, pero a esta organización se le atribuyen al menos 2 asesinatos y más de 10 balaceras en el área de Mayagüez. También cometieron secuestros. Estos asesinatos están bajo investigación, o sea que me voy a limitar en ese aspecto, pero es una ganga sumamente violenta y no temían en comenzar guerras de disparos contra sus gangas rivales, independientemente de quién estuviera en el lugar.
Carlos, los que estaban en prisión, ¿qué rol tenían en las actividades diarias de la organización desde la prisión?
Disculpe que no escuché la primera parte.
Los que estaban en prisión ya,
Sí.
¿qué rol tenían en las actividades diarias de esta organización?
Eran miembros de la ganga también. Algunos cometieron otros delitos por los cuales fueron procesados. Acuérdese que esta conspiración transcurre desde el 2021 hasta el presente. Algunos cometieron otros actos delictivos y fueron procesados por ellos en algún momento dado en el transcurso de esta conspiración.
Secretario Mr. Blanche, ¿qué lo motivó a venir precisamente a este operativo? Sé que lleva poco tiempo en el cargo. ¿Qué lo motivó a venir precisamente a este operativo realizado ayer aquí en Puerto Rico?
To Attorney General Branch, what motivated you to come specifically for this operation? I know you have been in this charge for a short time, so what motivated you to come specifically for this one operation?
So this is exactly what we are trying to do at the Department of Justice and the Trump administration when it comes to attacking what has been a chronic crisis in this country for generations, which is stopping the flow of drugs from anywhere they're coming from, mostly South America, into the United States. And so this is a great example. The work they're doing, if you look at, I know you guys just got the indictment, read the indictment. And I would encourage Puerto Ricans to read the indictment as well. Look at the work that went into this, and this is exactly the type of work we're going to do. I travel a lot to the border states, to districts where they're doing arrests like this. I want to be here not only to support the U.S. Attorney's Office, but to make sure that everybody in San Juan, in Puerto Rico, understands that when we talk about the Homeland Security Task Force, we're talking about every single federal agent in the United States attacking this problem. Every single state partner who wants to help us, working with us to attack this problem. President Trump called drug dealers terrorists, and that's because that's exactly what they are. And so when we have great examples like what we're seeing yesterday and the work over the last several months in this case, I'm going to show up whether it's Puerto Rico or whether it's anywhere else in the country. And so that's why I'm here today.
Yes, good afternoon, Attorney General. Knowing how complicated and all the resources required for this sort of intervention, and are there any specifics about new resources coming to Puerto Rico? In the past, Puerto Rico had been designated as a high trafficking area. Is there any other novel approach to helping local enforcement deal with this great problem, which is drug trafficking, and the use of Puerto Rico also?
Yes, so for sure. So what we have done with what President Trump and the administration has done with Congress over the past year and a half is really put a ton of money behind the Department of Justice and DHS. That money is going to places like Puerto Rico. So you have new prosecutors, you have additional prosecutors coming in, you have funding coming into the DOJ, then you have DHS that is now funded for 3 years, that is spending a lot of money here. This is a border district, right? So this is a place, most of the drugs that come into to Puerto Rico do not stay here. 80% ends up going to the United States and Canada, but mostly the United States. And so we're treating this like a place that needs a lot of attention, which I'm here for, but also resources, which is money and personnel.
Okay, but there's no specific amount that we know of yet? Or is there any amount that you can probably
But when you
estimate?
say amount, I don't know what you
Well,
mean. What I
about
mean is like,
resources
yes,
that-
there's more funding coming, there's more prosecutors coming, there's agents. I met with federal law enforcement this morning about making sure that they have enough bodies here to do their job. It makes making sure that the BOP has a functioning, corrections officers and folks that can do it. So no, there's not a dollar amount that this is what we're giving you. But when this U.S. attorney comes to me and says, I need more bodies, the answer is yes. When I meet with law enforcement like I did this morning, and we talk about ways that we can free up funding for the police department here and for the FBI, HSTF, yes, we're doing it.
Thank you. This other question is for Special Agent in Charge, and could it be in Spanish? Este es el modo operandi prácticamente de todas las gangas que hay en Puerto Rico, y hay muchísimas, utilizando residenciales y otras comunidades. Y usted acaba de decir que podría repetir esto cuantas veces sea necesario. ¿Podemos ver eso? ¿Cuentan con los recursos para hacer eso? Y si están preparados para las repercusiones que va a tener eso en términos de desestabilizar, ¿verdad?, todo lo que es la violencia en toda la región de Puerto Rico.
Sí, esto es, como le dije antes, el FBI va a tener una postura bien firme y agresiva, ¿verdad? Y si no lo ven aquí hoy ya, todos aquí trabajamos juntos. La colaboración en Puerto Rico es tremenda, es especial, y seguiremos. Yo dije que haríamos eso porque acuérdense que sí tenemos personal aquí en la isla, pero eso no quiere decir que el personal de Estados Unidos o otras áreas no lleguen aquí a Puerto Rico para ayudar. Y eso fue exactamente lo que hicimos aquí ayer. Si lo tengo que hacer 10 veces más, lo voy a seguir haciendo. Inundamos la isla con equipos tácticos, la policía es tremenda con nosotros, todos los compañeros aquí federales estamos juntos, unidos con el HSTF.
Buenos días, Katiria Soto de Noticentro. My question is for the General Attorney. El gobierno de Puerto Rico canceló un contrato a la compañía que debía en los puertos escanear los furgones. De esos recursos que van a traer a la isla, ¿va a haber mayor presencia de las autoridades federales vigilando que en esos furgones no entren y salgan drogas de Puerto Rico?
Good afternoon, Katiria Soto from Noticentro 4. So the government of Puerto Rico recently canceled a contract from a company that was in charge of scanning shipments coming through the ports. When they canceled this contract, does that mean that they're going to bring more resources to Puerto Rico in order to take over and scan those contacts?
Yeah, resources from the federal government.
From the federal government.
Sorry, I'm not familiar with that. Are you familiar with the question? What you're just talking generally about the challenges with drugs ending up on container ships?
Yeah, yes.
We talked about that this morning too. This administration is trying to stop illegal drugs from coming into this country. We're doing it all kinds of different ways. We're shutting down the border. There are drug boats that are getting blown up because they're trying to bring cocaine into our country. Container ships are a big challenge. There's legal discussion around how to deal with that, because if a container ship is coming from Puerto Rico and going to Tampa or to Savannah, Georgia, it's going from the United States to the United States. But the reality is, as everybody in this room knows, and every law enforcement officer knows, that there are a lot of times when in between Puerto Rico and Savannah, Georgia, there's a lot of cocaine being put on those container ships. So we're looking into how we can, we are going to address that, and we're going to make sure that we're working with DHS and Customs and Border Patrol so that they can effectively do their jobs. Nobody disagrees that that's happening. It's not as if there's somebody that says they think that we're wrong about that, and so the question really becomes, okay, how are we going to stop it? How can we get into those containers to make sure that that nobody's put cocaine or fentanyl on the container ship? So yes, that's something that we've been working on for a while with DHS, and I expect that there'll be movement on that.
Tenía otra pregunta sobre el operativo, el perfil de esas personas arrestadas y cuántos de ellos puedan ser menores. Si la gente no puede.
So another question regarding the takedown, the profile of those people who were arrested and how many of them could be minors.
No hay menores. Aquí en este operativo y en esta ganga hay hombres, mujeres que se dedican al narcotráfico. No están acusados menores, pero el ejemplo que estas personas dan a esas comunidades no lo podemos tolerar. Y nosotros vamos a seguir haciendo estos casos todas las veces que tengamos que hacerlo, porque no es una opción dejarlos que reinen en estos residenciales y en estas comunidades. O sea que el miedo de sacar a una ganga y pensar que otros van a venir, ese no es el análisis que debemos hacer para no hacer el trabajo. O sea, el trabajo lo vamos a hacer y, como dije, el que venga de nuevo o el que trate de ocupar su lugar, pues va a pasar por las mismas consecuencias.
Sí, para la gente a cargo del FBI mencionó hace un ratito que han identificado unos lazos con los carteles en México, con esta organización. Me llama la atención porque usualmente aquí se habla más de las vías de Dominicana hacia acá o de Sudamérica. Si podría dar un poquito más de información, qué tipo de relación han observado, si es una sustancia en específico que traen.
No, igualmente lo que dije ahorita, ¿verdad? Esas organizaciones, ellos tienen colaboración, ¿verdad? Y por ahora lo que sabemos es que están en conversaciones con esas organizaciones y vamos a seguir investigando esos puntos, ¿verdad? Y no solo son ellos, hay muchos más de esa región que nosotros tenemos, ¿cómo se dice? La lupa, ¿verdad? Y estamos viendo cuál es el collaboration que hay ahí para seguir atacando esta amenaza.
Vocero.
Buenos días, Andrea Santiago del Vocero de Puerto Rico. Hay 81 indictments, eso es bastante. ¿Cuán grande es esta organización? No sé si tienen un número estimado, pero ¿cuán grande podría ser esta organización aquí en Puerto Rico?
Hi, Adriana Santiago from El Vocero. There are 81 indictments, so that is a lot of indictments. So do you know how big that organization could be here in Puerto Rico?
Sorry, can you repeat the last part of the question?
Oh, so how do you have an idea of how big this organization is in Puerto Rico, or how big it could be here in Puerto Rico?
Well, right. So the question is whether we're done investigating. So if there's additional co-conspirators or members of this organization that have not been charged, I promise you that this investigation doesn't stop because an indictment is returned. And so, to the extent, the way that these cases work is that we've arrested a lot of people. Some of them will choose to meet with law enforcement and cooperate and tell us things we don't know. And the way that the HSTF and the U.S. Attorney's offices eradicate organizations like this is by continuing the work that's been started. And so whether there's additional participants in this group or this organization that have not been charged, if so, we'll find out. And if I were them, I would probably not be sleeping well tonight.
We'll take one last question.
Hello. Good morning to all, and good morning to Mr. Attorney General. My name is Oscar Serrano from Noticiero Digital Daily. I have a couple of questions. I guess I'm lucky this is my last chance. You mentioned earlier about the attacks you've been making on boats in Caribbean waters as part of this initiative against drug trafficking. I wanted to know how are Puerto Rico-based personnel, equipment, or facilities being used in those killings that the U.S. government has been doing in Caribbean waters and Atlantic waters related to drug trafficking?
Sorry, just so I understand the question. The question is whether Puerto Rican personnel are part of the Department of War's effort.
Personnel, equipment, or facilities based in Puerto Rico, are they being used for that initiative?
So I don't have information around who from Puerto Rico is participating. I will tell you that this is, as we've talked about, as President Trump has talked about, and we've talked about before, This is a Department of War-led effort. Of course, that necessarily involves law enforcement and working together like everything we're doing does. I don't have any visibility into individuals or resources directly from this island that are being used, but it certainly wouldn't surprise me if some of the information that we're getting comes back to Puerto Rico. I mean, that's a reality of the location.
Okay, thank you. Some of my other questions are related to another topic. I wanted to, now that you're here, have a chance to ask you, did Attorney Christopher Kais communicate with you directly or to someone else about the Julio Herrera Bancredito case that was being handled in the District of Puerto Rico?
I heard the Attorney Christopher Kais. I didn't hear anything after that.
Did Attorney Christopher Kais communicate with you directly or indirectly about the Julio Herrera Bancredito case that was being handled by the office in Puerto Rico?
So first of all, I would never talk about any internal deliberations I would have within the department around any particular case. I can tell you that I know Christopher Kais. He was one of President Trump's lawyers. I worked with him on one of the cases when I was, before I became Deputy Attorney General, representing the President. I don't believe I've had a single conversation with him. No. I mean, no. So the answer is no. I don't. When I was Deputy Attorney General, there's a process in place. When I'm Attorney General, there's a process in place when a defense counsel or a U.S. Attorney's office wants to appeal a decision or through, and that process doesn't include going directly to me as Deputy Attorney General or as Attorney General.
As Deputy Attorney General, do you have any involvement in the pardon process for the defendants in that case?
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just can't understand what you're saying. Can you?
As a Deputy Attorney General, did you have any involvement in the pardon process related to the defendants, the three defendants in that case? The pardon attorney, is directly under the Deputy Attorney General, and you were Deputy Attorney General when these pardons were granted. So I was wondering if you took any part in the pardon process.
So I've talked about this not just with the individual you're asking about, but more generally about what President Trump does and doesn't do with respect to pardons. He doesn't. If President Trump ever asked me about whether I believed a pardon was appropriate, I would for sure share that with him, and I would never share it with you, what I shared with him, because it's privileged communications between myself and the President of the United States. I do not talk to President Trump about pardons. President Trump has a right and indeed an obligation under the Constitution of the United States to determine whether a pardon is appropriate. That's the same right that every president has had since our Constitution was passed. And every president has exercised that right. He doesn't need my permission, my clearance, or my views when deciding whether to issue a pardon. And so there is a pardon attorney within the Department of Justice that has existed for a long time. But the president takes his own counsel when he determines whether to grant a pardon or a commutation of a sentence. And that's what I expect he'll continue to do. So at the risk of not giving you the answer you want, I would never talk about communications I have with President Trump because they're privileged. But make no mistake that President Trump has been given the authority under our Constitution to pardon or commute a sentence of any citizen of this country. And so that's exactly what every president has done and what President Trump is doing. All right, thank you guys very much again, and I appreciate you all being here. And as we walk out, I just want to again extend my appreciation to the hard work for the U.S. Attorney's Office and the work they did on this case, and the HSTF and all of their members, federal agents, state and local, the Puerto Rican Police Department, for once again making a community here, an hour or so away, a lot safer today than it was yesterday. So thank you guys very much. I appreciate it.